I lie here, in the suffocating stillness, watching the digital clock flicker as if it were counting down to a catastrophe I cannot name. You know exactly what I am talking about. That heavy, cold knot in the pit of your stomach when the lights go out and the silence becomes a megaphone for every mistake you made today. Why do we let the ghosts of things we cannot change haunt the only sanctuary we have left? I used to think the night was just a void, a gap between one exhausting day and the next. But I have come to realize it is a secret workshop where my soul is dyed by the ink of my final thoughts. If I carry my fears to bed like precious heirlooms, my subconscious spends the hours of darkness weaving them into the fabric of my tomorrow. We spend so much energy trying to shout down the chaos of the world outside, but have we ever stopped to listen to the war raging within our own minds? My hands are often raw from gripping onto things that were never mine to hold. I have paced this room, mentally rehearsing arguments with people who are not here, and agonizing over circumstances or the fickle moods of others. It is a fool's errand to believe that peace can be found by conquering the world around us. We are so busy trying to rearrange the furniture of our external lives that we ignore the crumbling foundations of our internal character. I used to think my anxiety was a shield, a way to prepare for the worst, but it was actually a poison I was drinking every night before closing my eyes. I realized that the things outside my window, the noise of the city, the judgments of peers, and the shifting tides of fortune are beyond my command. My only true kingdom exists behind my eyes. Yet, it is the one place I have left unguarded and overrun by shadows. Tonight, however, I am choosing a different path through the quiet halls of my mind. I am listening to the echoes of ancient voices that tell me that my worth is not found in the approval of the crowd or the accumulation of trophies. As the moonlight stretches across the floor, I am learning to plant seeds of serenity in the fertile soil of the dark, rather than feeding the weeds of regret. We are the architects of our own destiny, and our blueprints are drawn in those final moments before sleep takes hold. I am beginning to understand that the rhythmic pulse of my own gratitude is a more powerful commander than any external force. Instead of surrendering to the void, I am learning to use this time to reprogram my spirit, transforming midnight worries into the courage I will need when the sun eventually breaks the horizon. The fluorescent lights of the office hummed with a low, grating frequency. I sat across from Marcus, whose smirk felt like a deliberate puncture to my morning calm. He leaned back, tossing my report across the mahogany table with a flick of his wrist, signaling utter dismissiveness. "It's cute," he drawled, his voice dripping with oily sarcasm perfected over years of corporate ladder climbing. "Maybe next time, try focusing on actual data instead of these optimistic projections." My skin prickled with immediate, searing heat. It started at my collar and surged upward. A tidal wave of adrenaline, demanding a sharp, biting retort. I felt my jaw tighten, teeth grinding against each other, as my fingers curled against my palms. Every instinct I possessed screamed for me to mirror his arrogance, to dissect his own recent failures with surgical precision right there in front of my colleagues. The sting of public humiliation tasted like copper in my mouth, tempting me to surrender to a defensive rage. Silence stretched, heavy and thick. I could see the team shifting uncomfortably, their eyes darting between us, waiting for an explosion. Deep within my chest, I revisited the silent vows I made beneath the moonlight. This moment was my crucible. I realized his words were merely vibrations in the air, powerless unless I granted them permission to wound me. The urge to strike back felt like a heavy stone, yet I chose to observe its weight rather than throw it. I took a deliberate breath, cool air filling my lungs and dampening the internal fire. I didn't look away, nor did I lash out. I simply let his petty barb hang there, unanchored and drifting, while I reclaimed control over my pulse. His need for a reaction met a wall of stillness. This was not a surrender. It was a refusal to participate in a game designed to erode my peace. My victory lay in the quiet mastery of my own reflection. I stood there, a vessel caught in a sudden gale. His words were the surging waves, battering my hull, demanding that I tip into the churning sea of resentment. For so long, I navigated by the stars of other people's opinions, steering my life toward the shores of their approval. If they smiled, my waters were calm. If they scowled, I was tossed into a tempest. But I realized then that my rudder was in my own hands. Why should I hand the steering of my soul to a stranger who barely knows the depth of my ocean? To be upset by his mockery would be to admit that his judgment carries more weight than my own integrity. I drew an invisible line in the sand, forging a mental armor that no insult could pierce. As the ancient emperor once noted, we have the power to hold no opinion about a thing, and to not let it trouble our spirits. The sting I sensed was not from his tongue, but from my own desire to be seen as superior. This craving for validation is a fragile tether, binding me to the whims of those I do not even respect. My internal citadel remains unbreached, because I refuse to open the gates to his malice. If he perceives me as weak, that is his burden of perception, not my reality. My character is a fortress built of stone, while his insults are merely arrows of straw. I remembered the lessons of the enslaved teacher who became a philosopher. Some things are up to us, and some are not. My reputation is a shadow cast by a flickering lamp. It changes shape depending on the light others choose to shine. My true self, however, is the lamp itself. By seeking his nods of agreement, I was essentially begging for a crust of bread when I already possessed the entire bakery. I focused on the rhythm of my heartbeat, grounding myself in the present moment. I am not what he says I am, nor am I even what I think I am in moments of pride. I am simply the choices I make right now. The pressure to perform, to win the argument, or to save face, evaporated. I looked at the person before me and saw not an enemy, but a fellow human lost in his own fog. My anger subsided, replaced by a profound sense of indifference toward his opinion. The victory I sought was no longer a public triumph. It was the silent alignment of my actions with my principles. I stepped forward, not in retreat, but in a purposeful advance toward a life where my worth is dictated by my own reason, not by the fickle applause of the gallery. Aurelius stepped closer, his face contorted in a mask of practiced cruelty. He threw a sharp insult about my past, a barb designed to pierce the very foundation of my identity. He expected a roar. He expected my fists to clench, and my voice to shatter the heavy air around us. The crowd waited for the spectacle. their eyes hungry for a collapse of my resolve. For a heartbeat, a familiar fire of indignation flickered in my gut. Why does he feel entitled to my peace? Why do I allow this stranger to pull the strings of my pulse? I looked at him, truly looked at him, and realized the profound absurdity of the scene. He was straining, sweating, laboring to provoke a ghost that no longer lived within me. I felt a sudden, piercing clarity. If I react, I am his slave. If I suffer because of his malice, I have handed him the keys to my internal kingdom. I chose to breathe. I chose to stay. I chose to observe. Does he have the power to alter the truth of my character? No. Does he possess the authority to change the structure of my soul? Never. Why should I grant him the privilege of disturbing my equilibrium? The storm raged around me, yet I discovered an immovable center. This was the shift, the absolute realization that I am not a leaf tossed by the winds of other men's opinions. I am the wind itself. I am the sole judge of my own worth, and his vitriol is merely noise, as inconsequential as the buzzing of a fly against a window pane. The true mastery is not in subduing him. It is in governing myself. It is in the radical refusal to be offended. It is in the understanding that my frustration is a self-inflicted wound. I lowered my gaze, not out of submission, but out of a serene indifference. He could shout until his lungs failed, and I would remain untouched. I finally understood that the only cage that exists is the one I build with my own expectations of how the world should behave. Today, I walked out of that cage and left the door wide open. I am free because I no longer require him to be anything other than what he is. My strength is my own. My peace is my own. My mind is my own. I stepped away from the echoes of his anger, feeling the cool evening breeze brush against my skin like a gentle reminder of my newfound lightness. Every step away from heavy confrontation felt like shedding an old, suffocating skin. I looked toward the horizon, where shadows blended with fading twilight, and felt a profound stillness settle inside my chest. My pulse remained steady, a rhythmic proof of a victory won not through force, but through silence. This clarity is a sanctuary I carry everywhere. I see now how often I traded my tranquility for a fleeting desire to be understood or respected by those who cannot even respect themselves. No longer will I permit external storms to dictate the weather of my soul. My character is the only possession I truly own, and I shall guard it with vigilance born of love for truth. External events are merely raw material. My judgment is the sculptor. As I walk this path, I invite you to examine your own fortresses. Consider if you are holding on to anchors which only drag you down toward depths of unnecessary sorrow. True resilience blossoms when we stop demanding life bend to our will, and instead learn to dance with reality as it unfolds. The most formidable strength resides in the quietude of a mind at peace with itself. Ask yourself, what within you is truly yours? When you find that unshakable center, you will discover a freedom no man can grant and no circumstance can take away.